Hello, welcome to Local Matters. My name is Vicki Evans. A new Tucson business believes in the bond between horse and human in giving back to the community. We're going to learn all about Sentinel Carriage Company and two wonderful Clydesdale horses named KCD and Patton. Please join me in welcoming Jane Stansberry, owner of Sentinel Carriage Company, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me,
Especially at the
Vicki.
holiday season, because I know that you're doing a lot for the holidays. So let's talk about Sentinel Carriage. You know, what is it, and what do you have coming up for the holidays?
So I own a small carriage company. We employ 3 horses. Casey and Patton are my 2 Clydesdales. We also have a great big white Percheron now. We have carriages for weddings, quinceañeras, but primarily we do carriages for guided history tours, just like they do in Central Park or in Charlotte, North Carolina.
So what made you decide to do this? I mean, I have to ask, how old are you? You look like you're about 15, but how old are you? Oh, well, you don't have to tell me, but what made you decide to do this?
I'm 26 years old, and I am a second-generation carriage driver. I grew up in Philadelphia, and I've always loved horses. I just couldn't stay away, and my mom taught me how to drive a horse and carriage when I was 16 years old, long before I ever learned how to drive a car. So when I was 18, I went right downtown, and I got a job working for a great carriage company in Philadelphia.
What is a carriage company? Is it just, what is it? 2 horses, 4 horses, 1 horse? What, I mean...
A carriage company is any type of livery stable that employs working animals that go downtown or to any place that pull carriages, either for events or parties or for tours. But it's basically like a transportation service, but horse-drawn, and it's a bit of an old-fashioned idea, but it's a very nice way for horses to live and to work in the city and remain a part of our lives.
So you have had to, I would imagine, educate yourself about the historical situation in Tucson. And we go back a long way, right?
Yes.
We're going back to the...
Tucson has people living here continuously for 4,000 years. But going to any place in the United States or around the world, I don't know how people live there without knowing the story. So it's a great joy to me to take people around and tell them about Tucson's history.
Right. And you have, I mentioned KCD and Patton in my introduction, 2 Clydesdales. And what makes them so special to you? Why did you choose this kind of horse? Because they're a young horse. We just saw pictures.
Clydesdales are great, bright horses. They're very strong. They're also very personable. They're extremely gentle. When we have kids come and visit us, they duck their heads and go right down onto the kids' level, and they're very friendly.
Gosh.
And so I love working with them, and horses all around I think are great animals to be around. Clydesdales particularly are nice, but I like all kinds of horses.
And what do horses offer us? Sometimes I think there are many of us walking the streets these days who would love to know a horse. Either we don't have the opportunity, we don't have the drive to find a horse or somebody that has a horse that we could get to know, but we love horses as Americans. And yet you've had the wonderful opportunity of growing up with them. So what makes them so special?
Well, horses have been part of our lives for thousands of years, and now that we have automobiles and all sorts of mechanization, we definitely lost track of our lives with them. And so it's really special for me to be able to take horses downtown, because I meet people who have never touched a horse and have never seen a horse in person. And so it's a very intimate experience for them to be able to walk up and say, "Hi, can I pet your horse?" Winston Churchill said, "There's something very good about the outside of a horse for the inside of man." And it's really true. It's very true.
The outside of a horse for the inside of man.
We also meet people who are handicapped, who are disabled or challenged in some way, and they love to see the horses downtown. So we have a regular group of people who come and visit us to be friends with them.
Just to hang on and say hi. And yep.
They give a lot of hugs.
So you operate downtown. How does this work?
Well, We go downtown. I take my horses with me.
But I
to
know you
work.
start out at Congress, maybe? I mean, do you have kind of some routes or?
We have a couple different routes. We have 2 different tours. We have a half-hour guided tour and an hour guided tour. We also do Jingle Bell and Christmas caroling rides, which are our seasonal highlight. I love to do that around Christmas, and everybody sings, and we go from house to house and sing.
You mean through the neighborhoods,
Yeah,
not
through the
just downtown?
neighborhoods.
Through
we
the
go
neighborhoods.
through the historic districts, both Armory Park and El Presidio neighborhood. And sometimes we hop into the barrios. We can pick up on 4th Ave or downtown. But our primary parking spot is downtown near Congress Hotel.
All right. And I want to make sure that you all know we are talking about Sentinel Carriage Company, and Jane Stansberry is with us. And if you'd like to know more about this, we'd love to give you the information. It's again Sentinel Carriage Company. Please call 520-609-3582 or go online to sentinelcarriagecompany.com. And I have to ask you, Jane, which horse is that?
That's Patton.
That's Patton.
Yes, that's my boy.
Is that how old is he? He's still a baby, kind of.
Patton is 7, and
He's
he was
7.
a professional hitch horse. He worked as a wheeler, which means he was the horse or pair of horses that were closest to the wagon, and he went to national shows up in the Midwest.
Oh my gosh.
So he's a professional, and it's really a pleasure to work with him.
I wanted to ask you, one thing I forgot to ask you is how do these horses work with traffic and bicycles and, you know, the emergency vehicles coming?
Well, horses, our horses are trained very similarly to the mounted patrol horses. They're easily adapted to the environment in the city. We live in the city, so it's not a big surprise for them to see a trash truck or anything. That's all perfectly normal in their world. And they're just like us, and they're just like when we have dogs. We walk down the street with our dogs. We just adapt. As long as everything is comfortable for them, they have all their necessities met, good food, lots of water during their shift, and lots of attention from us and guidance, they do great in town.
In fact, I was reading about Sentinel Carriage Company. You really don't operate in the summer because it's just too hot.
We don't. This is a seasonal business.
So it's just too hot for the horses, right?
It's just too hot for all of us. The horses roll around in the sun and play out in the sun just in the summer anyway, but
Right.
we don't do anything.
So you prepare, right? You prepare for the next time. Talk about your clientele. Are tourists your main clients, or?
Well, originally we were geared towards visitors because that's what it always was like back east when I was working in Philadelphia. It was often visitors that would come to town. But now in Tucson, people are so excited to come downtown and get to know the town because they didn't know that there were historic districts. So more than just visitors, we have Tucson locals who grew up here and have never been to these areas, or grew up in the areas but didn't know the stories about the houses and the people who lived here and made Tucson what it is. So our clients are people who are living in Tucson, have guests coming into town, or have a special event to celebrate. And I also pick up people along the way.
You do?
We do have
So if I
walk-up
stood out there
service.
with like this
Yeah.
and said, Jane,
Well, we
can
don't
I
pick
have
up
a ride?"
hitchhikers.
You don't pick up.
We
Also,
don't pick up hitchhikers.
If I have a sign that says it's Vicky from
I have
from
the-
Local Matters.
I have the only tour in Tucson that you can ride without a reservation. So I'm trying very hard to make it accessible to people. People who are walking around, they have a National Geographic book and they're looking for places to go. And
Or they've been to the
they're
information
looking
center
for
at the
They're
Presidio.
looking for the Tucson Desert experience or the Tucson Frontier Town experience. And so they're wandering around, they don't know where to go, and suddenly they see a horse. And so they can actually come aboard, take a tour, and really learn about the city without having to walk. It's very nice to ride in a carriage because you're up above all the cars and you can see everything.
Right. So talk again about the kind of tours you do. And then I want to ask you about something else. But go ahead. Once again, tell the kind of tours you do. You say you have a half an hour. So tell us about that again.
So on our half an hour tour, which usually runs a little bit over, we talk about pre-railroad Tucson. We talk about geologic history. In the West, you can't give a history tour without talking about a little bit of basin and range geology. So we talk about the fact that Mount Lemmon was a volcano 70 million years ago. We work into paleo history and the ancient people that lived here because we have a rich history, especially in the downtown Tucson area. We talk about Presidio times, and then we walk into the railroad era and we go through the mansion districts that were caused by the railroad era.
Right. You've really steeped yourself in the history of,
If you
of
take
our
the
area.
hour tour, you could,
I'll get the
it's
full thing.
actually like the connoisseur's tour of Tucson.
All right. And on that note, let's see if we can bring up the contact information for Sentinel Carriage Company. We'd like to share that with you. Again, Sentinel Carriage Company, phone number 520-609-3582, sentinelcarriagecompany.com. And that is Patton, one of two Clydesdales that just bring Tucson to life with the Sentinel Carriage Company. So, do you have a favorite historical thing that you're really, kind of like, oh my gosh?
Well, when I give my tours, I'm always going, so this is one of my favorite things that, and so every other house ends up being my favorite thing and people start rolling their eyes. But one of my truly favorite stories is about camels coming to Tucson, because after the Gadsden Purchase, the desert...
Which was before the railroad, but and right
That would
before the
be-
Civil War.
That would be 1854.
Okay.
Right after the Gadsden Purchase, the United States wasn't really sure what to do with the Sonoran Desert and how to transport people and goods. And obviously these are very long distances to travel without water for horses. And so Jefferson Davis thought what a great idea it would be to bring camels here from when I say back east, I mean the Middle East.
Right.
And so Jefferson Davis imported between 30 and 44 camels to Tucson and 8 handlers. And they used them for several years before the Civil War. But it was much to the horses and donkeys' chagrin because they had never seen anything like this. And so they were freaking out. Horses would be rearing on the trails and totally losing their minds because it was so outrageous. And then just after the Civil War, they lost, or just before the Civil War, they lost all the motivation because of the Civil War. So everyone but
Jefferson Davis went on to be the president of the Confederacy.
Yeah, and the project got dumped, and so all of these camels, or some of these camels, were cut loose into the desert. And camels thought it was great here. There's no predators, and there's lots to eat. And so they procreated, and they actually lived until about 1946. The last one was captured in the desert out here.
No
They said
kidding.
until 1956 they were living in Baja, California, or Baja, Mexico.
Mexico, right. Oh my gosh. Well, they as most animals are, they're great adapters, right?
They
can just do
They
that.
are. Desert animals
Oh
are
my
great
gosh.
adapters.
So where were they headquartered here in our area?
They were actually stationed all over Arizona because they were used as transportation. So they weren't exactly headquartered anywhere because they were always on the trail.
And the horses, to this day, do horses not like camels right off the bat?
Horses are very suspicious of anything that is strange looking. So my horses, because they're city animals, when we go out to a ranch, they go, oh, look at that cow. Where's that horse's neck? So they don't really, they take...
It depends on, you just have to...
They take a close look at anybody who's different.
Yeah.
And in that respect, they actually love children because they're smaller and they're much more interesting than us big kids are.
Oh, I can see that. I can see that. Yeah. If you'd like one thing for people to know about horses and the human bond, we only have about 30 seconds. What is that?
Is that we really, really need it, and we should never let it go, no matter what.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us with Jane Stansberry. Sorry, Jane.
That's okay.
Jane Stansberry with Sentinel Carriage Company here in Tucson. And we hope you'd partake of just some of the many wonderful things that the Sentinel Carriage Company has and can do for you and your family. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Vicki.
So now we get to say cheers.